when a man of courage takes a stand, it stiffens the spines of others. And so when things are happening that we disagree with, do we stand up and fight that battle, or do we let it pass and go by?
Right.
And this was one I was so passionate about, helping young families who don't have anything. I at least want to support them as they're growing their families.
Hey, what's up, guys? Spencer Smith here, host of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast, sponsored by Pareto Health, ClaimDoc, and PlanSight. Enjoy today's episode. All right, well, I'm here with Sean Turner, CEO, founder, extraordinaire, whatever you want to call it, of Buffer Insurance. It's great to meet you, man. Great to sit down with you, and really excited to tell your story, man.
Oh, no, this is exciting. I love the fact that I'm even sitting here.
Oh, yeah, please. Well, I appreciate you tooting my horn a little bit, but really excited to dig into this. You and I actually did have, about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, a lunch meeting that was sort of out of the blue and just get to know each other. And at the last company, it wasn't really a fit for what you needed.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, Sean, you popped back on the radar of everybody about a year ago when you had this viral moment. So I do want to touch on that. But before we do that, let's get to know you a little bit. Like, who are you, your backstory? How'd you get here? All that good stuff.
Yeah.
Man.
So my name is Sean Turner. I'm president of Buffer Insurance. And I've never thought I would own my own business one day, but here we are. And it all started back in 2018 when I first started the insurance industry. I didn't know anything about insurance. I sold Medicare for maybe 6 weeks prior.
Okay.
For a financial advisor I used to work for. His focus was annuities and that. So I'd got my health and life license through working for him, and then just didn't want to work with him, market himself one way, but acted a different way.
Okay.
And so really felt the need to go out on my own. And so I was selling Medicare, and I saw this idea of employer benefits. I was like, this is exciting to me. I really liked the idea of working with entrepreneurs and protecting them. Had been in the military for some time. And so just had this like overall arching theme of my life of protecting people.
Okay. Interesting.
And so started the business and
So hold on. So I just want to make sure. So 6 weeks in to selling Medicare, was it supplement plans, or is that what you were selling?
Yeah, Medicare supplements, Medicare Advantage, all the Medicare plans, as well as employer benefits.
Okay.
But
you were like, I could do this. I'm going to go do. So I love the spirit, man, just to go out. So like, what did it look like to just go ahead and decide to start an agency? What were the early days like there, man?
Yeah, just like you see Jeff Bezos working out of his garage.
Okay.
It's too hot here in Texas to do that.
Fair enough.
I was at the home office and just sitting there making phone calls, just cold calling left and right. Didn't have any clients. It was a scary time because we didn't have any income coming in. And so it was nice though, because Medicare, you could talk to someone for 90 minutes, make a sale, get paid 3 days later.
Okay.
But that would pay the bills. But employer benefits, working with business owners and stuff, really was where my passion had lied. And so
when you were telling me off camera a little story about you had a little extra motivation, a little extra juice when you started the agency. So what happened?
Yeah.
there?
So I'm on the phone with a prospect, and I'm like, prospect, blah, 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 insurance this, blah, blah, blah. And my wife walks in, she's crying, and hands me this little thermometer and just sits on my floor is crying while I'm on the phone. And like, hey, Miss Prospect, let me call you back. And I look down, I'm like, this isn't a thermometer. This is a pregnancy test. And there's a line, but it doesn't say like pregnant, not pregnant.
Yeah.
So I asked her, like, she's crying. Are you crying because you're pregnant or crying because you're not pregnant?
Yeah.
And of course, that was our third child, and we're pregnant. Woo! So I had even more effort to not just pay our mortgage, but now get ready for this next child.
Yeah, it's like, man, it was just pile the weight on your shoulders a little bit. But I was telling you off camera, and this is, I think, a very common theme. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs. I know you obviously do as well. But just on the show, I very commonly I hear, oh, by the way, when I decided to start the business, these 3 other things happened that all of a sudden I had to figure it out. Like it had to work.
Yeah.
And I do think there's something to the notion that when your back's against the wall a little bit, or you have that extra impetus that almost it has to work or else, that kind of makes sure that you have the proper inspiration and motivation to go do that. So I'm sure a child was more than enough to add fuel to the fire. So obviously we're talking retrospectively now, and it was successful. But I'd like to hear sort of about the early days of getting that thing off the ground a little bit. So what was the first client like, all that good stuff?
Yeah, first client was so blessed to get our first client, 400 employees. and oil and gas, and he was very down to earth. You meet this guy, you would never think he had a business with 400 people because he's very humble, not flashy, but just wore overalls sometimes, and just had like this crappy truck, like just a regular guy, a blue collar guy.
Yeah.
And walk in and get that first client of 400 employees. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
And you actually prospected in person to win that group as well?
Absolutely.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so you'd be surprised at how many times you can just walk into a place and someone has a need. Maybe they have a pain point of like, I can't get a hold of my broker. He's always on vacation. He's always on the golf course. Like, and he's not responding to my needs. And you show up and you're there in that like white horse, shining armor kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so really just had this heart to serve people and got that first client. But then, so that paid the bills. And I gotten a couple other clients just by knocking on doors, talking to people, getting out there, a lot of grassroots efforts.
Yeah.
But lost that first client.
You lost it.
Yeah.
How long did you have him before you lost him?
8 months.
Just 8 months. So what happened to it?
He ended up selling his business and obviously to this national oil and gas company who already had a broker. And so that was like a knife in the chest to realize like I worked so hard, got this going, and then it just is slipped out for no apparent reason. I mean, there's a reason, but like nothing on my behalf.
Yeah, and then that's one of the things that I've always understood and respected about the nature of being a broker or a consultant is that there are so many things outside of your control that leads to the loss of a client with no fault of your own. Literally an acquisition. Oh, a new HR director is hired and they're friends with so-and-so at this other agent. I mean, there's so many things that can happen where just one day you get an agent record letter and you're done, right? But the inverse can obviously happen as well where you pick up a client. But I appreciate sort of the tension, the anxiety around picking up a client and what can happen on the other side of that I have a lot of respect for people that can do that.
Absolutely. And you want to build your business to where, all right, a client leaves, you feel it, but now it's not detrimental, like I can't pay my mortgage now kind of thing.
Right.
So thankfully, the early days were very humbling. And so we just got out there and hustled. But because it was just me, just one guy, the name of our company is Buffer Insurance. Everyone's like, why didn't you name it Turner Insurance Agency or something like that? And I was like, well, I didn't want to build it around me. I didn't want to be the guy.
Okay.
And I understand like a good reputation is worth more than silver and gold, but I didn't want to be I just felt like it was kind of egotistical to name the agency after me. And no offense to anyone that's done that, but I didn't want to do that. And so I was like Googling canopy coverage, canopy insurance, and I don't know how many, like I had hundreds of names. I'm like going on like companynamegenerator.com.
Yeah, you get like, what's that, like how Post Malone got his name or whatever? There was like a rap name generator, and I think he kept that. So like, you had like a literally insurance agency name generator or something you were using?
So because I'm coming to this game so late, we're in the 21st century and internet's been around for decades now. It's like every domain name's taken.
Right.
But I had actually come across Buffer Insurance. I was like, wow, well, buffer is like a sense of strength. Like you got
you're buff, right?
Yeah, you're buff. But then if you look at the actual dictionary definition, it's an object between two frictional forces. I was like, oh, that's exactly what us as brokers are. And what's interesting, this is fast forwarding, just real quick side tangent, that years later, just last year, we look and like the synonym for buffer is honest broker. Like look it up Merriam-Webster dictionary.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
So like, wow, we're honest brokers. Like how much foresight? I didn't know any of this.
You maybe even created that new definition just by doing good work, man.
Well, yeah, it's not like Wikipedia where you go in and like you
just
change
edit it. Yeah. Well, and I want to talk about the progression of Buffer Insurance, and I love the name, by the way. I didn't realize that was the case. I just assumed it may be a family name or something, but that makes sense. And even in the world of self-funding, which I'm in, there's something called a corridor and stop loss, which is really the buffer between expected claims and max claims. And so we talk about that being a buffer sometimes in that regard. So as you start going up market and getting into self-funding and things like that, now you've already got an association with the buffer.
To the products,
corridor. Yeah. But before we go further, man, I don't want to gloss over, there's a couple of things that I think are really important about your story. Is one, your service. And I would love if you could, because that's something that's been a relatively common theme on here with guests, as well as I know people obviously respect that about you. So I'd love to hear a little bit about, that background. And then it's always an interesting transition going in from military to insurance. So I want to talk about that transition. But could you share a little bit about your history there in the Army? Pareto Health is the manager of the largest employee benefits group captive in the United States. And it's also now the main sponsor of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast. I chose to partner with Pareto Health for three main reasons. Number one, their dedication to improving the world of health benefits. Number two, their mission to reduce volatility and to make self-funding simple for mid-sized employers. And number three, the strength and scale of their program. With over 2,300 member groups and more than $1 billion of stop-loss premium under management, Pareto Health is the most robust solution of its kind in the country, period. Stay tuned for more information because I'm sure I'll be featuring them on an episode of the podcast very soon. Visit Pareto Health at paretohealth.com or follow them on LinkedIn to stay up to date on the latest news and developments.
Yeah. So I joined the Army, specifically the infantry. And I don't know if it's because I like playing Call of Duty video games, but also I wanted to pay for school and came from a family where we didn't have a lot of funds, so paying for school was important.
Okay.
And then also just love our country. I love what it's about, love the freedoms and just have this sense of protection. And so join the infantry, come out of basic training, go back to UT Austin. I don't know, 19 years old, something like that. And I get my phone call from the unit I had just been assigned to literally days earlier. They're like, hey, Turner, you're being deployed to Iraq. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I thought I was going to go to school. I thought I was in the reserves. I didn't know this could happen so quickly. And so within weeks after graduating basic training, I'm like in Iraq. It's hot. It's deserty. We're doing the transition. And this was back in 2008, 2009. And so it was this period of transition in Iraq because presidential administration at the time was pulling out based on their campaign promises.
Okay.
And so it was a really interesting dynamic.
You said that you were telling me off camera the rules of engagement changed a number of times as well during that tenure, and so it was almost like fear, right, of beyond what you would normally expected being in warfare. But like, can we even engage anymore? Am I going to leave this place, right? So you said some of that psychology played into it, didn't it?
Yeah. So really, at the time, it was like the president who had just been elected. His campaign promises pulling out all of our troops from Iraq, which I think was a good promise. But the way in which it occurs is how you get there and there's a threat, eliminate the threat. If that guy wants to shoot you and kill you, you kill him first. And then as things are progressing out, we're moving out and it feels like your hands are tied to where, hey, wait, they have to shoot first before. It's like, what
happens if he hits me, right?
You ever seen a Western show where they duel? It's like, you don't wait for the other guy to pull his gun first. Like you.
Yeah.
And so it was this transition period, and transitions are always hard, no matter what type of life events going on. So come back from Iraq and trying to transition. Do I go to school? What do I do? I don't know what to do with life.
Yeah.
And so
how long were you actually in service? I think you said 6 or 7 years.
Yeah. So I went from 2007 to 2014.
Okay.
And this was 2008, 2009, kind of going.
Well, did you find, and this is I've heard this with regularity, right? It's sometimes, especially the longer your tenure, the more difficult it is sort of to transition into this quote unquote civilian life. So did you have any of that experience of like, was it dull? Was it boring? Was it hard to cope with the regular reality a little bit?
Yeah, so I would say from that deployment specifically, coming back life was dull because you're for an entire 13 months, you're just living with this heightened sense of adrenaline constantly. And so you come back and you don't have that. And so it's easy to kind of go down the dumps, but then also it's kind of like when I was growing up, my mom would always say like, hey, Sean, you can be anything. You can do anything. Well, that sense of empowerment is important. But it's also kind of like if you put gunpowder on a table and light it, it kind of is loud, but it doesn't do anything. But then you put gunpowder behind a focused barrel and you put focus on it, like it can go somewhere. So when I came back, I didn't have a lot of focus, went through the season of like, I'd love to start a business, had a couple kind of small businesses, and really just, it was difficult. Yeah.
Well, because it was difficult sort of finding your way or finding like that. I love that analogy, by the way. Nathaniel, put that timestamp down. We'll use that as a clip. But that analogy of sort of focusing the energy, right? That by having focus force, it has direction as well. And so there's more of a purpose and it's more effective. So like, sounds like you had difficulty of finding where do I actually put my energy into something? Yeah.
Went through helicopter school, did that for a while.
Okay.
Went to college. Ultimately, I ended up graduating from college from UT Arlington with an economics degree. And then from there started some other businesses and went into a family business, which is kind of like going into the mafia. And everyone's working for the family, but I'm also married. My father-in-law owns the business, and he was kind of grooming me to take it over.
Yeah.
And so that was
so it didn't quite work out, it sounds like.
No, yeah.
Well, so, and I'd love, Sean, as we move forward to, obviously I want to hear the story about the viral moment, but let's kind of flash forward in that building of Buffer, because I know there's a few years as you're building the agency, and then all of a sudden, boom, spotlight put on you. But as you sort of progress in telling that story, then we'll get into the viral moment as well. So talk to me about kind of standing that thing up and getting it off the ground where it's now a viable career for you.
Yeah, so it's just me out of the house. It wasn't until about a year and a half, 2 years into it, I first hired my employee number one.
Okay.
But up to that point, it was like, how do I make us look bigger and more trustworthy, more impactful than we are? It's like that book, Art of War. When you're small, look big. When you're big, look small. And so I was telling you earlier, like my phone system, when someone called in, press option 1 for this department, option 2 for this department, option 3 for this department. Right. And they all
They're all going to
me.
you. Yeah. Well, that's good though, man. I think that stuff's important, right? It is difficult when you're trying to win over an employer of size, right? It's good to appear that you have the infrastructure and the personnel, and there's nothing wrong with a one-man show by any means, especially if you're capable. But there's something about knowing there's other people behind you that gives them the confidence and the assurance that you can execute on what you say. So how long did you have to? You said a couple years that you had to pretend you had staff until finally employee number one came along. Cool.
Yeah, and then so we started adding as revenue supported it, we would add another employee. But I would say even from every business I've seen, it's like your level of responsibility increases, but the revenue kind of trails a little bit behind.
Okay.
So you get to this precipice where you need to hire someone because their work's there, but the revenue hasn't really caught up yet. And so every single time we've had to hire someone, it was like that. Now it's getting a little bit easier because we have redundancy in employees and account management and Medicare staff and things like that. But it's been interesting to see how that, I couldn't have had the foresight to see how it was going to be that way.
Yeah, and I don't know, when you started, did you have an exact vision of what you thought this thing would be? You probably not, right? You probably just went into it.
No idea. Okay. I had a word. Hey, I feel like God told me to do this. I'm just going to obey. Let's see how it works out. Like, and if it doesn't work out, then my wife always said, I'll be with you even if we have a cardboard house on the side of the street. I don't think that's actually true.
They say that, but no, I do. Actually, I appreciate that when you have a wife that supports you, right? And supports kind of the risk taking in the big picture, right? I think that's super crucial to know that they've got your back, and I'm sure she does, man. And I'm sure she's not completely fibbing about the cardboard box thing, but I know you would never let that happen either.
Yeah.
So I do know you got three kiddos, right? You got a burgeoning family, or I think we're 3 and done.
3 and done.
Okay,
yeah,
I understand.
Absolutely.
I'm 2 and done. But then as you're building this agency, as it's becoming real, right? You're staffing up, you're growing. Obviously, you're saying there's a little bit of like a tiptoeing effect of the clientele. Did you ever have to, borrow money, or did you ever have to like take out loans in order to be able to grow, or could you always sort of stay ahead of that?
Stewardship and finances was always big for us. So we never wanted to be in debt as a family. With that first year, we did get into debt, and it took a little while to get out of it just because the revenue, I was investing every single penny we earned back into the business.
Sure.
And it was a long-term investment. And so we had never borrowed any money, never taken on any venture capital. However, when 2020 to 2022, there was all this like free money from the government. And my father-in-law gave me some wise advice. He said, Sean, this PPP, it was the emergency disaster relief loan. And so I don't remember what the requirements were, but it's for small businesses to take a 30-year loan from SBA. And it was like 3.75%. He's like, Sean, this is cheap money. Take it and just sit on it. And if you need it, like you have it, but you can also deploy that money investment otherwise, but take it. So I did it. And now you see interest rates are like 7-8%.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my gosh.
I'm like, what's that Leonardo DiCaprio meme where he's just sitting on the throne, like kind of sipping wine.
With his pinky up. Yeah. Well, that's good foresight, man. And I'm sure that was a really good bet to make, especially because it just gave you cash capital, right, to be able to deploy if you needed. So did you ever actually put it in motion for the business, or did you just use it as an investment vehicle?
I started using it to hire some salespeople early on, but I really wish I wouldn't. Like looking back, those are some expensive mistakes. I didn't know how to hire people. I didn't know how to use predictive index or DISC assessments on hiring tools to figure out the right people.
Sure.
And so I did make some mistakes, but obviously like we've made up since then. And so we're still in a great spot. And
well, I say mistakes come with the territory in entrepreneurship, man, as long as they're not catastrophic mistakes, right? As long as it's not so big that you have to close the doors, those are just learning opportunities for you. And now I think you're probably in a better position to know how to hire and who to hire when it comes time. So are you still doing most of the sales, or do you have a sales person or a producer on staff now?
Yeah. So to the point of your mistakes.
Yeah.
I like to learn from my mistakes, but I like even better to learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah, let them make the mistake. Yeah, and just observe from afar. But I feel you on that, man. I think there's something to be able to sort of put yourself in the shoes of another person, and if you can witness from afar what they've done, good or bad, right? I think we all stand on the shoulder of giants and learn from other people. But if you do see somebody else make something that looks like a catastrophic mistake, you go, duly noted, I'm going to make sure I don't do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we have hired other salespeople, which is nice. From a consulting side, we see ourselves as professional consultants. And anytime you have that type of relationship with your client, the kind of natural tendency is to hold on to that. And so I always knew I wanted my business to not be built around me. And so there was this like tug and pull of responsibilities that would come, and it's like, no, I need to let that go. I need to empower my team. I need to help them, because if I never put them in situations where they need to like learn something new, then I'm going to be holding all the keys, and then I'll be the bottleneck.
Yeah.
And so because I've been able to let go of responsibilities in a safe way and empower my employees, also become professional consultants, we've been able to grow pretty quickly. And I think that was the key to our growth early on, was letting go, even though it's scary.
That's a great perspective, man, because some people want to be the guy or want to be the gal, and everything has to go through them. And you use the term bottleneck, and I think that's absolutely true. There's probably a little ego at play in that, and I understand that. But then also you're going to limit the actual capacity for your company to grow if everything goes through you. There will be a ceiling inevitably that you hit if you can't delegate, hire good people, know how to recognize and groom them and train them to be proficient. And it sounds like you've always had a little bit of a long game in mind, keeping that mentality, and I'm sure that's part of the reason why you've succeeded. Now, let me ask you this, though. Standing up an independent insurance agency in today's market is difficult, right? Because we see a lot of aggregation. There's a lot of those entities out there that sort of gobble up those independent agencies for market share. That's part of their strategy. What does it look like retrospectively, looking back 4 or 5 years and going, now why we were able to do this in pretty tumultuous times to do that and stay independent? So talk to me about that a little bit. PlanSight is a complete game changer in the world of insurance brokering. As a broker, you know how time-consuming and error-prone the traditional RFP process can be. But what if I told you there's a better way? PlanSight is the only end-to-end RFP solution on the market made specifically for benefits agencies. It's like having a superpower that gets you an average of 8 to 10 hours back per employer renewal per year. And the best part? PlanSight supports all carriers, all funding types, and all group sizes for over 20 different benefits. If you're ready to make your RFP process faster, more efficient, and more profitable, it's time to call PlanSight. Visit plansight.com now to book a free demo and discover the future of insurance renewals.
Yeah, I think the reason we were successful was, it wasn't for my knowledge, because I didn't have any. It was partnering with vendors who saw, hey, this guy, he's going to work and he's going to help us make sales. So let's come alongside him.
Okay,
and so general agencies and these other vendors were really who I was relying on. And I was like the bird dog. I'd go say, hey, here's an opportunity. And then I would go back to them and say, what do I do now? Oh, you need to go get the census. Oh, okay, let me go get the census. And so it was like that back and forth. And so we had so many loyal, I would say that they're loyal to me, but now I'm so super loyal to them for their friendship, and then extending, and those phone calls every single day. And so I think becoming an independent agent now, you can still do it, because especially here in Texas, North Texas specifically, there's so much new business opportunity, companies moving their headquarters here, new businesses being started. I think we live in a metroplex where someone could do it. Now, if you're in the middle of rural Oklahoma, probably be a little bit more difficult.
Sure.
But I still think it could be done. But there is a massive consolidation happening
Yeah, and I imagine, you know, obviously you probably don't want to talk about specifics, but I'm sure you get phone calls, right? I'm sure. Yeah. And like, what is your sort of long-term mentality about that, right? I mean, I can see both sides of that equation, but as a business owner, you have to decide what's best for you and your staff and things like that. So what's your goal around staying independent?
Oh, I think staying independent is great. So Jim Collins has a book, Good to Great, and this is like a classic business book, right? And so one of the concepts he has in there is this big, I can't remember if it's the big metal wheel or what, the flywheel, that's what he calls it. And he's like, it takes so much effort to get that thing to go around one time. And then the second time, it's got a little bit more momentum. And by the third and fourth time, and now it becomes less effort to keep it spinning. I think we went through so much effort to get this thing going. I think it would be wasteful of my time to sell out now. You know?
Absolutely, man. I appreciate that, and I love that, man. I'm you know the son of a small business mom and pop entrepreneur, so the little guy fighting against the Goliaths of the world. I love that story, and I obviously wish you well there. I want to talk to you about the growth though of your agency, right? And how did that growth sort of change the type of groups you were working with and the size of the groups? I'm sure there's a snowball's effect around that as well, right?
Yeah, so early on we'd take we're scrappy. Oh, you got 1.5 people, like your husband could be the second employee, and now we have a 2-person group, but really only 1 person enrolled. So we would do a lot of that kind of piecemealing, I would say like the scraps left over from these large agencies where it's not worth my time. And now as we develop and get more tools under our belt, more knowledge about how things are more complex, the client we're going after is larger, but even our growth mindset was to take care of our employees, and so having those employees be champions for our company, and I just saw so many great leaders at these larger corporations, whether it's Southwest Airlines or whatever other company that has great leaders. They invested so much into their employees.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
thought, we have to do this. We have to develop cultural values. We have to develop systems and processes, routines and rhythms that will help us keep this going and develop a healthy culture.
Yeah. Well, and having a healthy culture, but investing in your people, I think is crucial. But there are some businesses that are reluctant to do that to a degree, because there also is the flip side of that coin is you develop great people and you empower them and you invest in them and then they leave you, right? So that's always the risk. But I think if that's a built-in inherent risk to doing that, you just understand that there's a percentage of people that will move on, but you need to empower those folks to be bought in, but two, to, like you said, sort of supplement your capacity to help you scale the agency and the vision that you have set forth. Yeah.
I will say every single person we've hired, and we have, we're about to have 10 people now.
Nice. Yeah.
And none of them have had insurance experience previously.
Okay.
And so it like that kind of sounds prohibitive because you can't just plug and play and they can't just take off, but it just meant that we didn't have to kind of tear down any bad habits. We could teach them, but then it also meant, hey, how do we onboard this person more quickly? And so we built playbooks and resources to help them learn it at a much faster rate without the trial and error that I experienced when I first started.
Yeah, and we talked about operationalization. That's a long word. I think it's a real word.
It's an SAT word right there.
Yeah, I hope it's right. So we talked about operationalizing your business earlier and this maybe is a good segue into that sort of the viral moment where you got some national exposure next year, and I want to hear that story. But it almost was like forcing you to take a look at your business, right? Because there was so much influx of activity. And I think just hearing you talk about how you onboard people with no experience, but are able to train them very quickly to get them up and running, clearly you have an operational mind to be able to do that, because that's not accidental. I mean, is that some of your military training? I would suspect?
It's just one of those things where in the military we just trained, and our plays were not complex. They have an infantry handbook, and it's been the same since like the 60s.
Okay.
And so they might update things small here and there, but you would just train the same play over and over and over. And part of that was that in the military, it's like when stuff hits the fan and you lose your comms or your communications or radios with your other teammates, you know what they're going to do because you've already done this 1,000 times. And so I think just learning those plays over and over, business doesn't have to be complex. It can become more complex, but it doesn't have to be to get started and do something well.
Cool. Well, that's awesome, man. And I feel like we've done a good way of sort of like leading the audience on to this, like, hey, what is this story about this viral moment? So why don't we go ahead and get that out of the way? We've dragged them along for half an hour, and hopefully everybody's stuck around to hear it. But I think it's such an amazing story. And when I saw you pop up on like this public sphere, I'm like, what happened?
I know that guy.
I know that guy. So tell us this story, man, because I think it's such an amazing story, and I just want to hear you kind of recount it a little bit.
Yeah. So last June in 2022, Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Dobbs decision, which meant there was no more, like the states can't, the states have the option of choosing whether they were going to allow abortions to happen in their state or not. So we live in Texas, which is very conservative, and they decided we're not going to. And so what happened was that the large corporations that exist in America wanted to kind of have this virtuous signal to say, hey, we're going to take care of our employees by paying for them to go out of state, have an abortion, go to Colorado, have your abortion, come back to the office on Monday, and we're the good guys.
Yeah.
And I was explaining to my wife, I'm like, this is wild. Like, this is an upside down world. Like, do you remember? And I was telling my wife Lauren, like, do you remember when we had Zoe, our 8-year-old daughter, who's 8 now? She wasn't 8 when she was born, but
yeah. I get it.
Just to clarify, no. So I didn't have any insurance. This is before I started the agency. I didn't have any kind of maternity or paternity leave. I was back to work within 48 hours. I was like, man, this is so hard. Like, why don't we make it easy for our employees to have babies? So we provide, now we pay for, we announce this benefit to our team after discussing with my wife and just how difficult this was. We're going to pay for the cost of the birth of the baby. We're going to implement maternity and paternity leave. And then we're going to pay, if families want to grow through adoption, we'll pay for the medical costs associated with that as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so we built like a pro-life handbook with strategies for other employers. So we announced this to our team, and all of them are like 25, 30-year-olds. They're like, oh, okay, like, cool.
Yeah, cool.
Like, there was no like applaud.
Because they haven't seen how expensive it is to have a
no
baby.
idea.
Yeah,
These guys, they didn't see what they were getting. And so it was kind of like just another day at the office. And I was like, why don't we announce what we're doing online to activate other employers? And then that's when we built the pro-life strategies guide is what we called it.
So how did you announce it? Like, what platform did you announce this on?
Yeah, so we put out like a dual thing, and we're not social media people by any means. We, like, when someone liked our post prior to this event, we'd have 20 likes. It'd be my mom, all of our 5 staff members at the time, including me.
I totally get that.
Like, but we put on Instagram that, hey, we're doing this, and this is, if you're an employer, you can do this too.
And was this a video, or was this just a text-based?
Text, like image-based text.
Okay.
Saying, hey, this is the things we're doing in response to Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
And we put on Instagram and Facebook. Well, overnight, we thought we had gone viral. This local kind of influencer, her name is Ali Stuckey, had shared our post. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is amazing. She has 400,000 followers. I was like, whew, that was crazy. Nothing. And
you thought that was
it died. A whole day went by. I'm like, that was cool. Like, that we even, like, that they're sharing this so that we can get our reach out, our
yeah, because I think you were doing, and not to obviously put words in your mouth, but I think you said you're kind of sort of signaling to other employers that this is possible, and this is the playbook that we put together, right? It wasn't necessarily saying, hey, I want to, stick my flag in the ground of this political stance, and what is it called? You virtually signaling the other direction, right?
Yeah.
So you probably didn't suspect this was going to happen. So all right, so the Allie Beth Stuckley thing happened, then it kind of died down, and you thought, oh, that's it. But clearly that wasn't. So what happened next?
So we had even invested, like, we paid an attorney to help us write a maternity and paternity leave policy. So we were sharing that for free. We had, hey, this is how you pay for maternity leave through short-term disability. So we had actual strategies for it. And so we just wanted to share those for free. And then the next day, Daily Wire posts an article referencing us. And then Fox News reaches out and says, hey, Sean, will you come on our show and do an interview? I'm like, what's happening? I have no idea. And then we had thousands and thousands and thousands of people reaching out. I was on Newsmax, Breitbart, like all these major publications, and they were basically amplifying our message. Yeah. And it was wild. We had to, we literally turned off our phone system.
Really?
Because we couldn't, it was just so stressful. And our team, we have 4 people at this point, including, like, or 5 people, including me. So like we're just a small little speck of a company getting, like, I would say worldwide coverage.
Yeah.
We had people from Spain and Portugal and South America and Iceland reaching out to us, like
Wow.
people from all over the world who were touched by this message.
Yeah.
And it caused so much problems for us.
I'd imagine. Well, if you shut off your phones, right, I would presume majority were probably supportive messages or inquiries about working with you. I imagine, and obviously it has been a boon to your business, but also I'm sure there was a little bit of less than desirable inbound calls as well, some hate mail and stuff like that. You probably had a ton of that, yeah?
Absolutely. We had quite a few people reach out to us, letting them know that they vigorously disagreed with our stance. But for every one person that we had, probably 10,000 people reach out to us saying that we support you and we want to be part of this. How do we be part of this? And we're just a small insurance agency that like had no idea that this was going to happen.
Yeah, and then I think the time when I actually saw you was when you were being interviewed by, was it Kurt Cameron of Growing Pains. So it's like, tell me the story of like getting in touch or how they got in touch with you and, you know, brought you out and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so Kurt Cameron's producer actually called me and said, hey, I saw you did this message. This aligns with Kirk. He's adopted several kids, and this is something that's close to his heart. Would you fly out to Huntington Beach and be on a TV show with him? And I didn't, honestly, I don't watch TV very often, so I'm like, Karen, that rings a bell.
Right. Well, I mean, even we were having coffee, and I was like, what was he on again? Like, I'm 40, I'm a little older than you, so I know obviously Kurt Cameron was famous when I was a kid, but I didn't even remember what show he was on either, right? But I obviously know of him. Yeah. So what was that like? What was that whole interview process like? And, you know, meeting him and all that good stuff, was it pretty cool?
Yeah, my wife was ecstatic, and then obviously, like, there's a lot of people that watch this TV show, and so we fly out there. There's like 25 people in the studio. You go in for makeup. I've never worn makeup a day in my life prior to like this going viral thing, so I just thought it's just surreal, you know.
Yeah.
And so it was really neat. And then so getting to meet people who were on TV and in these like major, I guess, platforms. A lot of them are the same on air as they are off air, and I was, I guess, maybe surprised by that, but it was really refreshing to see these people are just genuine people.
Well, and I would say this probably just like to have staying power. That's a really vicious industry to be in, for sure. But to have really true staying power, so your reputation stays good, I think you have to be genuine, both on and off camera. You know, as silly as that sounds, like for this, my goal is when somebody meets me, having seen the show before, that they get who they expect, right? That I'm not some like tyrant off camera or a completely different person. But I think that's important. That way, you never have to remember who to be. It's not a character or anything like that. And it's refreshing, even somebody in Kurt Cameron's position, to hear that that's the case with him as well. And I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Well, and this whole like economy that we're in now is being more and more polarized.
Yeah.
And I heard this quote one time. I don't know who said it, but it was like, when a man of courage takes a stand, it stiffens the spines of others. And so when things are happening that we disagree with, do we stand up and fight that battle, or do we let it pass and go by?
Right.
And this was one I was so passionate about, helping young families who don't have anything. Our employees are the ones we can impact. Like, I at least want to support them as they're growing their families. And I think that's going to bring more loyalty. It just goes back to our cultural values of teamwork and things like that. And so we really wanted to support them. And being in the spotlight for this made me realize, like, there's a values-based economy to where we have people who are wanting to do business with us simply because they share the same values as us.
Right.
We have people not wanting to do business with us simply because of our values.
Yeah.
And I think that's appropriate. And so there's a values-based economy that's happening to where we can vote. You can vote at the ballot box every 6 months to 2 years, 4 years, however often your elections are locally. But what's more important, you can vote with your dollars every single day.
Yeah.
And that makes a big difference.
Well, I like that terminology. I don't know if I've heard values-based economy before, but I like that terminology, man. And, you know, obviously we all know what's going on. It's June in 2023. So we know that, you know, the things that are going on with Target and Bud Light and things like that. And for whatever happens or whatever your stance is on that particular issue, like you said, you have the opportunity to support or not support through your dollars. And I think that does actually make an impact in aggregate if you use your money to sort of align with your value systems. I also think it's true what you said. If that value system isn't aligned, that is also okay. They can find somebody else to partner with as well. And if we know that that's the reason that there's been a lapse, if you will, in our partnership, we can shake hands and say, I wish you luck, and you can move on from that, and you can go work with somebody that you prefer. That's also okay. But I was going to ask you about that. When you take a stand on something that's relatively rife with controversy, something like the abortion conversation, you're taking a stand and sort of weighing in on something that is controversial. So did you even suspect that might be a controversial stance to take at all?
ClaimDoc is a medical claim auditing and member advocacy company. We provide fiduciary services to employer-sponsored benefit plans and allowing them to create an environment where we ensure that the benefit plans are being charged in a fair and reasonable basis.
My business is basically people, and it become a real simple transition. We thought it was going to be far more complex. I've saved, we'll say, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I could not say enough about ClaimDoc.
I did, but at the same time, I even had an employee who I had this lady. She crafted the Instagram and Facebook posts, and she's like, "Are you sure you want to put this out there?" And I was like, no, we can't be fearful of the backlash that might occur. And so when I said that, she's like, okay. Like just kind of fearfully like, the suspense. And then not knowing like how much support. I think what people who disagree with us want us to feel is that we're isolated in feeling a certain way. And so when unbeknownst to most people, it's like, wait, the silent majority is out there and they do exist. And so I think the silent majority of people, whatever value you have, is like just letting other people know you have that, I think is smart. But there's in this values-based economy, you have almost think of it as a spectrum. You have on the far side one value, on the other side the opposite opposing value. But in the middle you have these agnostic companies who they don't care who their clients are. They don't care about values. They do, but they don't want to vocalize it. All they care about is creating great products and great solutions. I think there's a place in the market for every single one of these people.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And it's up for those companies to make that decision on their own, right? And then live with the consequences, good or bad of that. But I would love to talk about now, all of that happened. How long was it where you were sort of in the public eye? Was it 6 weeks, 8 weeks, months? Like how long did it actually play
I would say
out?
the thick of it was for like 3.5, 4 weeks.
Okay.
But then it kind of extended out because certain times we would film something, it wouldn't get released till like 8 weeks later.
Okay.
It was literally from June to July 5th or so, that weekend, all the way through the end of the year.
Okay.
And so we still have people reaching out to say, hey, I found you on this podcast or whatever. It's just like, wait, I filmed that a year ago.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, it's that's the beauty of like producing stuff too, is it can circulate and you don't even know who and how and when and how long, but it eventually might pop on somebody's radar and then serve its purpose again. But I'd love to talk now that you're on the backside of this. It's been about a year. Again, we're shooting in June 1st of 2023, so it's been a little less than a year. How's your business changed? It's got to be immense. So talk to me some of the good and the bad of what's happened. Yeah.
So the bad was that we weren't poised for the influx of information and people reaching out. And so our contact us form prior to this event, someone would fill it out. It'd send me an email and I'd read the email and say, okay, this needs to go here. And I would forward that email. Well, when you have thousands of people reaching out with static email forms coming to you, doesn't make sense. And so we ended up investing a lot into getting automation set up with landing pages and things like that really helped our business become more robust and have the capacity for a much larger influx of people. And so that was one thing. Then the next thing was building out departments of people who specialize in different areas.
Okay.
And so now our team is double what we were last year, a year ago. And so it's nice to have redundancy. So if we just had one account manager previously, if she goes out and she's sick or gets hit by a bus or whatever kind of crazy situation that causes her to not be able to work that day, previously it kind of fell back on me. And so being able to have redundancy within the business to where, okay, now we have 2 or 3 account managers who can all do and share the workload, it makes it easier for everyone within the business to be able to have backups and things like that.
Okay. Well, that makes sense, right? It's just having you said redundancy is a good word, but staffing up the personnel, right? Because as you scale, let's say you take on 20 clients in a year, right? Like, I don't know, you probably have a calculus for how many clients equate to a new person. Yeah. But I imagine it just sort of forced that growth into that next stage of your agency, right? So did it also bring you up market? Did it start getting you exposure to larger employers as well?
Yeah, so we were licensed in maybe 19 states prior to last year, and now we're licensed like 38 states.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so we have clients all over the U.S. now, and it's exciting to be able to help people in Arizona or New Mexico or New York. And so having different cultures, I mean, America's known as a melting pot, and it's neat to be able to connect with people in other states, and especially businesses of larger size as well. And in helping, and we've seen that we can so add value to these larger companies who need help with processes. And I think because I do think about operations all the time, I don't see myself as a salesperson. Honestly, like I would be much more comfortable behind the scenes kind of tweaking things than I am out in front of people. Yeah. And so that's something that I just have a passion for.
Well, it comes with the territory, though, right? When you found a company, but like it or not, you're going to have to be out there talking about it. And I'm really grateful that you talked about it here. This is self-funded with Spencer, but there's really no reason to force that issue. I know you said you're doing some level funding with Cigna, which I think is super cool. And I love that there's all sort of alternative funding mechanisms out there. And depending on the size, I mean, that's why I came over to the captive world, because I believe in what Pareto's doing as well. But I just love the world of benefits. I love the possibilities that come through self-insurance, but that's not applicable to every single employer. Yeah. But I really love that you've built a business around your personal values, the values of your wife and the people that you employ, and you've stuck to that mission as well, that you haven't lost that as you've scaled over the last couple of years. But what does the future look like for you? Like, what, obviously now that we've gotten here, I'm sure you're not happy being here, and the next step is up here. So what do you think is going to happen in the next couple of years with Buffer Insurance?
Yeah, what's neat is what you just mentioned just now, like not everyone can get a self-funded plan. And what's nice about self-funded plans is that there's a lot of different levers you can move to customize how you want to offer healthcare to your employees. And so it's neat to be able to see our clients kind of graduate up from, hey, you got this fully insured care, and that's the only option, to the next step after that. And it's neat to be able to help them through each stage. But one thing we always talk about with our employers and their employees is stewardship. We talk about stewardship is like kind of a key term that is used for budgeting, for money, for how we spend things, but it's also how we discipline ourselves today for our health and how we use health. And so I really do think that even though healthcare is reflective of new technologies, the cost of healthcare is, hey, the x-ray machine that the hospital has today cost $1 million when they might have bought a new one 2 years ago. It's like that cost is not coming down, so that's kind of baked into some renewals. But at the same time, it's like, okay, how do we teach employees how to steward their health care? Because their health is going to directly affect the cost of health insurance. Yeah. And so how do we get people to be activated and be advocates for living healthier lifestyles?
And is that something you intentionally build into the strategy with your clients? I mean, talk to me about what you're doing around that stewardship of their health to encourage that behavior.
Yeah, we want to make being healthy look attractive to people, because we know, for example, you look on the side of a pack of cigarettes, it tells you on there, Surgeon General says this could cause cancer. Do people still smoke? Absolutely. Yeah. So knowledge doesn't necessarily change people's minds about things, but making it attractive and helping them slowly change their mind.
Is that attractive through incentives then? If the way you design behavior or plans around behavior then, I guess?
Yeah, so we can talk, and it goes down to the culture of the company. So for example, if the culture of your call center is to, hey, every Friday we bring in donuts, well, everyone loves a donut, but at the same time, you eat a donut, you crash afterwards. It's not sustained energy. It's not healthy over a kind of that accumulated time. So it can go down as low as that, just helping them change the culture of their company to helping, let's have incentives in place for them to go visit the doctor at least once a year.
Yeah,
because men don't go to the doctor.
Guilty as charged, dude, for sure. Yeah, but I take that approach that kind of probably similar to you. You seem like a pretty fit guy too. It's like, I'm going to do everything I can to prevent the catastrophic stuff. I'm going to take care of my health. And I've talked about this ad nauseum, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I do believe there's a component of an obligation that an employer has to their employees to encourage that behavior. And then in the insurance world, if we can design and make that attractive, like you said, through stewardship, so that these people are incentivized to actually take onus and ownership of their own health. And so that's the mentality, good or bad, that I have, is I'm going to do everything to sort of pour into myself to make sure I'm as healthy as possible, to avoid those interactions with the healthcare system. Because I really do think that like when you find yourself sort of stuck in the healthcare system and now you're going through it, it's because there's 20, 30, 40 years of bad behavior that's precipitated that's gotten you in that mess. And I'm trying to prolong that interaction as much as possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing is like legislation over like healthcare kind of really skyrocketed once the Affordable Care Act was passed. And so there's things like insurance companies can't make more than 15% profit. So it's like, wait, why is that a thing? So if they just want to push up the premiums so that their profit's bigger, that's the only way that they're, so we've incentivized incorrect behaviors. And so
Absolutely.
it's identifying those. And obviously we're not going to move this ship around. We didn't get here overnight, so we're not going to unwind it overnight. Mm-hmm. And so what can we control? We can control what we're a part of. It might just be ourselves. I may not be able to control what the pharmacy industry is doing, just me as one person, but I can control how I behave and interact with those companies. And so teaching.
What I think in conversations like this are important, Sean. I genuinely do believe that there is a purpose around having a conversation like that. Even if one person that is listening to the show goes, oh, that's a great idea. Or, I love that term stewardship or value-based economy. You have that sort of top of funnel conversation about the things that are out there, and it sort of trickles down. And I really do believe there's value in that. So as we sort of move this thing along, obviously to get ourselves on the way, I don't know how long we've been talking, but it's probably close to an hour now. I want to hear about what you actually think in terms of the big picture of the future of healthcare. So not just buffer, but what, this healthcare system that we've created, good or bad, where do you think it's eventually moving? What's your perspective there?
Yeah, I think just taking that big idea and breaking it down to a smaller idea, there's one area I think is just being just now kind of shifted, and that's moving from basically smaller employers who have maybe 5 to 25 or 5 to 50 employees who have only seen fully insured products, moving them to level funded products where they can get money back at the end of the year. They're in control of like the claims, or maybe not in control, but their price is directly related to the sensitivity of the claims being incurred. Mm-hmm. And I think having companies shift to that level funded idea, which is the next step below.
It's kind of the baby step. Yeah, I really truly believe, but it's a good first step for sure.
But what's happened, we've been telling people this, hey, the reason why fully insured rates are so expensive is because of sick people. And so as more and more healthy groups move off of the level or the fully insured to level funded, these fully insured companies are being left with only the sick people. Mm-hmm, and so you're seeing kind of a paradigm happening where fully insured rates are going up way higher. They may not go up as high because the carriers taking out benefits, modifying the plan to make it less valuable to kind of offset the renewal.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then you see these other companies who are healthy and have moderately low claims going to level funded. And so I think there's a big kind of crossroads that's occurred that people are finally catching on to.
I would agree, man. And I have definitely seen that happen, which is why I'm a big proponent of self-funding as well. If there's any misconception I can dispel, it's that if you want to lower your premium, you have to reduce your benefits. That seems to be one of the few levers that you can pull and you're fully insured. I've seen it time and time again where when groups go self-funded and put the proper strategy in place, they can not only reduce the cost of their health care, but they also can enrich the benefits simultaneously. Both of those things can be true. Yeah. And it seems to be like there's this misconception that that's not possible because they've been trained that way through the limitations of being fully insured.
Yeah.
100%.
You got
Boom,
it right
stamp.
Yeah.
So closing thoughts here, Sean, and this has been fun, man. I really appreciate you coming on, and I love just getting to talk to people that live and build businesses in this industry. But for the folks that have listened this far, listened through the full podcast, what are the closing thoughts that you have?
Yeah, I say if you don't know your values and you want to participate in this values-based economy, identify what you believe in and start articulating that for yourself so that when something does come up, you know how to stand. Yeah.
I love it, man. Yeah. Well, again, Sean, it's been an amazing conversation. I wish you and Buffer Insurance the best. Maybe we'll see you on, who knows what show we'll see you on a year from now because some other viral moment has happened. Maybe it'll be the appearance on this podcast. But it's been great to chat, man, and hope to have you on sometime down the road.
Thank you, Spencer.
My pleasure.